I'm pleased to announce our first speaker. To start this year's conference, we have a National Council officer and an activist many in the party will be familiar with. Our first speaker is someone who is out leafleting in his region on a regular basis and has organised countless events and activisms himself. He's built a dedicated activist base in his region and works on a daily basis to develop the party's political platform. He's also central to the development and implementation of our community politics approach. He was our first parish councillor, and he provides support and advice to our councillors to help them in their community politics work. He works with activists who want to be involved in community politics in their area and provides the resources they need to do something positive for their community. If you're someone who wants to step up and be a leader in your community, he's the man who can make that happen for you. Our first speaker is someone who works tirelessly not only to build our councillor base, but to support our existing councillors and to build campaigns around them to support their work and build their local profile. So to provide the review of the year, I'm very pleased to introduce our nominating officer, Councillor Anthony Burrows.
Thank you for that very kind introduction, Mr. Gale. Last time I stood before you in a meeting like this, I made some bold claims. I said we would be registered as a party, and that has happened. I told you we would gain more council seats. That has happened. I told you we would grow in membership. Look around this room, there are more members. Is there anyone who would call me a liar? There are those who say that winning is impossible in this day and age, but it's not. And I'm happy to tell you how we are winning and how we can keep going forward. It's not easy to deal with the Electoral Commission knowing that elements of their staff are biased against us, but we put the hours in studying the system so we can counter bureaucrats before they can even make a move. We are the only party in the UK to have a commitment to Indigenous rights enshrined in our constitution. We've gained more council seats by taking part. It really is that simple. More than that, we even set up a council ourselves where there wasn't one before, giving power directly back to the people. You might think everyone who is not us is an enemy, given the way the media portrays things through a distorted adversarial lens, but on the ground things are quite different. There are working class people in the Labour Party, for instance, who might be councillors and activists themselves, but find themselves agreeing with us more than they do their own party leadership. When we go canvassing or surveying, we find people are highly receptive to a patriotic sentiment, more receptive than the mainstream would have you believe. Our membership is multiplying and growing because we're doing exactly what we said we were going to do. And because we're focused on the love of our own people and not a rigid ideology, we're making new friends along the way. We have representatives here from Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, even as far as Poland and Germany. You could call that a healthy dose of multiculturalism, if the word multiculturalism applied to a diverse array of nations in Europe, but we know it doesn't. We even had a couple of journos who were allowed to come, but they had a change of heart, not us. We don't hide from anyone. There are those who say, you can't win anything, you've only got 10,000 followers on Twitter. Well, we started with nothing, no party, no website, no councillors, no allies, and now we have all those things and more. When are they going to realise? When are they going to understand that there's no brakes on this train, we're just going to carry on? When are they going to get on board? If we take a look at where politics has moved in the past year or so, we'll see where we fit in. After 14 years of a Tory government, there is now an incoherent centre-right trying to rebuild or replace it, a collapse in the SNP vote, a resurgent Lib Dems, and of course, the rise of the stormtroopers. If I think back to 2020, I remember feeling disheartened. Nations were under the thumb of authoritarian regimes, pushing all sorts of policies built on lies. I didn't think it was possible for people to rise up anymore, that we'd lost something in ourselves, that we would face a grim century as a result. But I didn't understand that this was a temporary thing. It had to happen for better things to come down the pipe. And now we see everywhere, across Europe and here, people are fed up of two-tier societies. They're tired of politicians taking more and more in taxes, sending it abroad, handing it to special interest groups, and failing to do the basics of looking after their own people. We see unlimited money for Ukraine, for foreign aid, and even for protecting mosques now. But when it comes to our own, the rhetoric is always cut back, tighten the belt. And people are starting to notice this and ask all the right questions. We see revolutions in the media, the rise of platforms like GB News. Maybe you don't like GB News, maybe you think it doesn't go far enough, but the fact that it's there and they want to take it off air tells you everything you need to know. They are afraid of the truths that are being spoken. A big problem is that on all platforms, too much time is given to a university-educated centre-right that offers nothing but the liberalism of 20, 30, maybe 40 years ago if you're very lucky. And they'll lament how institutions have been captured by a wokerati, but they won't tell you how to prevent that, let alone evoke a national consciousness that could combat it. It's not enough to complain and rehash talking points from 2016, the early 90s, or worse, Margaret Thatcher, as though any of those things could possibly save the day. They have nothing to appeal to the masses with, especially the young, because their cowardice only allows vague slogans, appeals to the same wishy-washy liberal nonsense that got us into this place in the first place. They are so easy to defeat. You call them racist and they'll cower in fear. They'll purge their own ranks. They'll even do a keynote speech showing their woke credentials to try and apologize to people who will never let them off the hook. It's pathetic. The English-speaking world is held back by a generation who cannot let go of post-war liberal nonsense. They whinge, complain, take up airtime, and that is the intellectual poverty of it all. You should be able to articulate that you are sticking up for your own people without an apology. The rest of Europe is looking to reassert its identity. We should be doing the same. When challenged, they fall back on British values, the same modern myth pushed by the left. The values of democracy, rule of law, individual liberty, which aren't bad. But then it's mutual respect, tolerance of those with different faiths and beliefs. These were first outlined by the Prevent strategy in 2011, so they can't be that fundamental if they've only just been outlined in 2011. And they were created by those who are either ignorant of our history or want to erase it. I could give an entire speech on that matter alone, but we'd be here all day. We could produce a grand debunking video, perhaps, to solve this problem. But in short, democracy is not a value, it's a decision-making tool thought up in ancient Greece. Rule of law is very important, but we need to talk more about how it's being subverted. Mutual respect and tolerance. They certainly have no respect or tolerance for our beliefs. Our beliefs are the same ones that our grandparents had. This is just a Marxist euphemism for social justice ideology. And let's be honest, no one ever rode into battle for mutual respect and tolerance, did they? I mean, can you imagine? Lines of men, shield walls, maybe muskets, maybe in a trench, and there's a commander in front of them saying, "Come on, lads, let's march forward and give them a bit of our mutual respect and tolerance." Individual liberty. I don't know whether to laugh or cry. We have less liberty today than our grandfathers did, and it's getting worse all the time. If you don't know your history, you can't invoke the values that drove our people to greatness in the past, and you can't win anything today. People fought for their families, for their homes, for their people, for their freedoms. These are real things that men sacrificed their lives for, not luxury liberal beliefs written down by some god-awful civil servant. And they push this stuff onto you in the media. They push it onto children because they know it inhibits your ability to fight back. And I would tentatively put forward that what has driven us more than anything else is an aversion to tyranny, a desire for sovereignty, the demand for natural justice, our hard work and ingenuity, and a kind of civility that went unstated because it was accepted as a norm to begin with. And we are aligned with all of that. Our party's motto is family, community, homeland. You'll see weak imitations of this elsewhere, where they replace homeland with nation. But they can't define a nation without breaking into a cold sweat. Others will replace homeland with country, because they're stuck in a mindset that a country is just an economic zone that people move in and out of. Homeland is key in more ways than one. It ties everything back to a sense of place and a sense of identity. And in contrast to these charlatans that I just spoke of, you'll see others who still push the idea that you can just march on London and initiate some kind of regime change. They say street movements are worthwhile, despite the fact that it's been a waste of time at best and a grift at worst for at least 10 years, probably a hell of a lot more. And history shows us this approach doesn't work anyway. Take the Peasants' Revolt, 1381. Yeah, we're going all the way back, lads. Right. Widespread oppression, heavy taxation drove the common people to rise up and march on London. Their leader, Wat Tyler, took his grievances straight to the king. Got his head chopped off, got killed, outright. Peasants disbanded, rebellion fell apart. Fast forward to the Pentridge Rising, 1817, 9 miles from where we are today. I might well be related to some of these guys. The gravestones around here have my family's name on them. 300 men rose from Pentridge and marched towards Nottingham, believing that a nationwide uprising was planned. But it turned out to be a trap set by a government spy. They were caught at a crossroads and arrested. After a show trial, 3 men were executed for treason. Many others were imprisoned or exiled to penal colonies in Australia. And there are other stories around that time frame that are exactly the same. Fast forward again to Orgreave, 1984. 6,000 police officers turned out against striking miners, attacking them with batons and dogs. It was brutal, almost medieval. The state made it appear that the miners instigated the violence. The BBC used heavily edited footage to support that narrative. The miners not only lost at Orgreave, they lost the political battle too. And again, 2002, I was at the Countryside March with 400,000 others. I still have the pin badge and wear it quite often, but it didn't change anything. 2003, 500,000 came out in protest of the Iraq War, and even though they had support from powerful figures, nothing changed. It still happened, and it went on for a lot of years as well. You don't take power by marching, you take power by forming a political party and acquiring institutional control at every level. That's how the trade unions evolved from disgruntled workers into a force that established workers' rights, how land reformers got around the aristocracy, how universal suffrage came about. That's the pattern of modern history. That's what you have to do if you want real change. All those people were considered to be radicals, dangerous even, but their ideas are now normalized. Nationalism is currently regarded as radical, even though its core ideas were the common standard a very short time ago. We're not trying to convince anyone anything new, like those guys were. We're simply reminding people of the truths that they already know. And look at what's been achieved on the continent through serious, forthright political action, and contrast that with the weakness and the dead-end roads that people go down in our own country. There will be activists pretending to be journos right now, sat at their keyboards typing away. Oh my God, he's taking over. It's going to be a fascist dictatorship. I don't care. I couldn't give a monkey's, and neither should you. We can already hear their high-pitched screeches, their effeminate voices, their smell, their soy-based snacks. Are we really supposed to be scared of their newspaper that barely anyone reads? Do you really think we'll roll over and give up? That's what we are? It's pathetic. And judging by the success of our friends on the continent, standing firm doesn't do any harm, does it? We're reaching a point now where our enemies are hiding in the shadows, unwilling to come out and show who they are and what they stand for, let alone enter into a debate, while claiming some form of political legitimacy. You can't have both. They say their far-left brain rot is the only kind of politics that is allowed, and anything that is illiberal is the politics of hate and must be stopped. But there's nothing quite as hateful as trying to stamp out a people, or trying to stamp out the very idea that those people existed in the first place, or attacking the idea that we're allowed to gather in a place like this and freely exchange ideas. Gather in a town hall, which is what it's for. It's what's been used by generations to have meetings like this one. They're doing it now. They've already started this morning, posting online. Everyone needs to tell the town council they can't allow this. Well, it's what they're for. This is part of democracy. It's normal. They're trying to bring in something else. These attacks on human dignity and civil liberties should be called extremism. But the state struggles to define extremism, because if you wrote a good definition, they would be captured by it. What else can you call Comrade Starmer when he's publicly pressuring the judiciary to remand people in custody when there's no threat to public safety? Demand custodial sentences for non-violent first offences that haven't actually hurt anyone, while simultaneously letting out violent criminals who within hours go on to do terrible things, all to make a political point, and the innocent are the ones that suffer the consequences. By eroding the separation of powers, he's done more to undermine those fundamental British values that they claim to cherish than anyone in this room. It's projection. They accuse you of being extreme, while also being as extreme as possible themselves and abusing their power to do so. Fundamentally, the left only cares about rights when it's in the context of social justice. By this, they mean elevating groups and granting them privileges and special protection that the general population is not afforded. A classic example is how certain groups, certain religions, are given never-ending protection. And they even consider bringing in definitions, so-called phobias, to criminalize people who say anything against them. Meanwhile, they encourage a cancel culture where a person can be bullied or ostracized for expressing a political belief. These things are all just thoughts, speech, association, and should be treated equally. But it's self-evident that in today's society, a two-tier society, that some are more equal than others. I think most people now can see a double standard being applied, that every group must be respected, yet our people are deemed unworthy of that respect. They water down Scottish identity to the point where it is simply living there for a while, as long as you're not English. The same thing is applied to the Welsh identity. They are now erasing the term Anglo-Saxon in an attempt to rewrite history and deny the very existence of an English ethnicity. The reality is that we are arguably the most well-documented ethnic groups in the world, with well over 1,000 years of those defined groups existing and a backstory going back 10,000 years or more. They abuse their own laws because they don't want people to have real rights. They just want social justice. And the centre-right that I mentioned earlier fails to do anything about it for 14 years and now only seek to rebuild or replace the Tory party, keep their heads in the trough, and continue damning the rest of us. They have no understanding of what needs to be done or how to put things right. But what makes us different to them is that what we do is based on a solid, natural political foundation. We are not just saying we're against something, we are for something. Everyone has to be for something. You must stand up for your own people and your own land. It isn't about disliking other groups or moaning about what other people are doing. Too often we see people getting trapped down that dead-end road, focusing their animosity towards others. It's a symptom of discontent. It's not what nationalism is. We believe that everyone has a right to a homeland, a right to take pride in who they are. We're not interested in the worship of ideology. We're not going to bow down to capitalism, socialism, liberalism, or any 20th century doctrine. We're certainly not following American nonsense either. We're simply saying, do what is right. Do right by the people, because without the people, there is no nation. It's about reasserting and reclaiming the right to govern ourselves and taking power away from those who wish us ill. That is the true nature of nationalism. We believe human beings are tribal, and that's not a bad thing. that people are moved by what matters to them, moved by their natural instincts. And we must work with that and not try to build a system to change what people are, turn them into something that they're not. We might be called simple-minded fools for trying to engage in politics without having some abstract concept or doctrine. But I say quite the opposite. I say that they are fools to think that people will be moved by ideas that have already failed. And let's be clear, this straightforward approach doesn't imply any naivety on our part. We are fully aware that in this country and across the Western world, there are internationalists who conspire to keep us down, to keep nationalism down, because they don't want nations to reassert and reclaim the right to govern themselves in their own homeland. They want to keep the boot on our necks. And it doesn't matter whether that boot is capitalist or socialist, so long as it keeps us down as an atomized, multicultural mass with no sense of identity, a mass of consumers, cash cows. We don't need to go on about that all day. We just need to keep asserting the simple ideas that should be the bedrock of any national politics: family, community, homeland. It is that simple. And I'll leave you with this. I don't ask you to climb the mountain on your own. I ask you to remember who you are, what your ancestors fought for, the sacrifices they made to get you here. That we are still the same people who conquered a third of the globe and are responsible for around 40% of the world's inventions and discoveries. There is nothing that we can't achieve. And even though we've had a century of decay, the world still rightly trembles at our name, at the mere thought of us climbing that mountain together to restore our nation and put things right. Thank you very much.